right, Carsten, Melanie, here we go. So we're going to dive into A on your template, your first workout. And again, please don't feel like this is set in stone. You can really plug and play as you start to do this more and more. And again, Melanie, you've had maybe, I think, a fair more experience than Carsten as far as your training is concerned, your working out is concerned. If there's other things that you like better or different variations of these, please feel free to put them in. Right? Again, this is a template, so feel free to play around with this. Now, the first thing we did was your deadlift. And deadlift is really just, you're just lifting something off the floor. We're going to use this dumbbell. These are probably going to eventually be pretty light for you. There's different ways that we can make this more or less challenging, and we dove into it just a little bit, but let's dive into the basic lift. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make my center of mass close to its center of mass, and the way I do that is I'm going to walk up to where my ankle is in line with the center of this dumbbell. So I want to be as close as I possibly can. I don't want to be too far back. I don't want to lift it out in front. I want to lift it up pretty close, especially if it's heavy. And that's something you can take into consideration just in everyday life. I'm going to hinge my hips back, right? Notice my knees, they release, but it's really my hips going back that makes it deadlift to deadlift. My hips are moving on in a horizontal fashion versus a squat where they're moving in more of a vertical path. And that's how you can differentiate the two. Deadlift, horizontal, hips, squat, vertical hip path. So with this, again, release the knees, sending my hips back. I'm going to grab the belt. I want to make sure my sternum is lifted. I want to make sure I have a neutral spine. And what that means is I'm adhering to this natural lumbar curve, which kind of goes like this, right? Natural thoracic curve, which rounds the other way a little, and natural cervical curve, which goes a little like this. So again, neutral spine or flat back. From here, big inhale. Exhale, I'm just going to stand straight up, driving through my heels. Inhale, I'm going to reverse that path. Notice I'm just standing straight up. I'm driving through the heels. I'm not leaning back at the top. That sometimes tends to want to happen. And as I go to lift, I'm not letting my back round, right? I'm keeping that lift through the sternum, nice, strong posture. And what you can always do is spend a little time down there. If you feel pretty strong, then you know you're in a good posture. If you're in this kind of position where it just doesn't feel good, probably not the best position. Now, there's a few things we can do to make this more or less challenging. Obviously, you can go heavier weight to make it more challenging, or the inverse, you can make it lighter. The other thing you can do is if it feels like it's just too low to the ground, find something to raise it up on. Maybe it's a block, maybe it's a couple of books, but there's ways, right, that we can make this more or less challenging. Now, when the weight is just too light and you guys have you got to the point where you're just like, wow, this weight's too light, I want to make this more challenging, but we don't necessarily want to get heavier dumbbells. We don't need to do that. Well, what we can do is that Romanian style deadlift that I showed you as well. And that's where we come up, but as we go down, we just stop about midway. So right before the dumbbell touches the floor, and then I come back up. Same idea. Inhale as I lower down, exhale as I stand. Inhale as I lower down, just as far as feels right for you. Exhale as I stand. Again, notice my hips are going back. My knees aren't going forward, right? They're staying where they are in space as my hips go back. I hope that's helpful. Moving on, the next thing we're going to do in A of your workout is your dumbbell bench press. Now, I think you guys have this bench, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think you'd mentioned that you had this bench. With your dumbbell bench press, right? Carsten, we were working on this. How do you get into the position? Now, sometimes it can be a little tricky. My recommendation for most everyone is if you can't safely lift the weights and bring them into position, probably too heavy for you to use. Even if it feels a little light once you get going. Make sure, safety first, stability first, and then we challenge ourselves. But from here, right, I'm gonna lay back. Dumbbells are gonna come up into position. I'm pressing my feet strongly through the floor. And as long as this feels good on your back, press your heels through the floor, squeeze your glutes, lift your chest. So notice I got an arch in my back. I'm not trying to flatten out my back. I got an arch in my back, and I'm really letting the shoulder blades push into the bench or sit on the bench. I don't want those shoulder blades to be up. I want them to be packed back and down like we do with that prone cobra. From here, I'm going to inhale, lower the dumbbells down. Now notice I'm not keeping it out here, right? I'm bringing them down and in a little. So this is about 60 to 70 degrees of what's called shoulder horizontal abduction, or abduction, meaning, right, I'm bringing those elbows out about 60 to 70 degrees away from the body. Big inhale. Now just be careful with your shoulders, right? The farther I drop those elbows down, the more pressure that's going to put on the front of the shoulder. My recommendation is really, especially if you have any issues with any joints, hips or shoulders, limit ranges of motion to roughly 90 degrees. 90 degrees at the elbow, obviously to protect the shoulder, 90 degrees roughly at the knee, at the knee joint, right, to protect the hip. So roughly 90 degrees, right? That's going to, anything further, now that's going to require me to stabilize more at the hip joint and at the lower back, right? So again, with your dumbbell press, limit to roughly 90 degrees. Again, Carsten, we were working on how to get out of this, right? What you can do is bring the knees up, bring the dumbbells to the knees, take a big inhale, exhale, come on up. All right, you guys, so moving on. Now, what I like to do is put in some kind of single leg exercise into all of my training, just because it's really important, especially, Melanie, for you, being, hiking is, like you do, right? Having, some kind of single leg training is really important. So again, I like to put that in. After this, we did your hinge, we did your push. Now, we're gonna do, because we did a hinge on your double leg, we're gonna do more of a squat base or a knee dominant exercise for your single leg. And there's all kinds of stuff that we can do. My recommendation, the simplest thing is just a step up. Now this bench is pretty high, so it may be just a little too high to do this. So what you can always do is use like a stool. Right? That's a simple way to do this. Is just to use like a stool or step, some kind of kitchen step if you have it like that. But real simple, right? And the way that you can make it more challenging is just put dumbbells in your hands, maybe 2 dumbbells. Real simple. Another variation that I don't have in your template, but that you can also do with the TRX that I like a lot, is just a single leg squat. And what that's going to look like is this. I'm going to pick up that back foot. Again, with a squat, the hips traveling in a vertical plane, right? So I'm letting that knee release forward as I drop that hip down. Notice I'm only going as far as feels right for me. All right, I hope this is helpful. Let's move on. The final exercise in this series is one that we did while you guys were here, and it was what is often referred to as a TRX low row. And all of that, the low is just the shoulders are back and down, the elbows come in. Elbows come in towards the body. And notice the way to get into this, right? What I want to do, same thing, handles at chest height. I'm going to extend back. I'm going to walk those feet forward. Now, the farther I walk my feet forward, the more challenging this is going to be, right? The farther the feet are back, the easier it is. The big thing is as you pull, stay wide and open across the chest. The shoulders go back and down, the elbows go in. What we don't want to do is this, right? I don't want to go here because I'm going to feel it here. We don't want to work those upper traps. For most of us, they're overworked. We want to work these guys. Remember that prone cobra that we did? We want to get these guys engaged, right? That's the goal here. And your arms, your biceps, the front of your upper arm, that's going to be working. The other thing I don't want to do is let my hips drop out and come in. I want to maintain control over my abdomen. Something that I like to do on these is allow my toes to come up and stay grounded through the heel. You do not have to. I like to do that. If you want, you feel more comfortable, keep your feet down, especially at first. All right, you guys. With all of your exercises, with the bigger stuff, I would stick more for sets of 8 to 10. With stuff that's a little bit less, or that you can vary, like the TRX row, 10 up to 15. Generally, my recommendation for you both is start off going 8 to 10. If that feels really easy to do 10, go 12. If 12 feels easy, take it up to 15. By the time 15 feels easy, scale up, whether that's in weight, difficulty, meaning like a higher bench, or walking your feet further forward. Whatever you choose, take it up and then just drop the repetitions back down, 8 to 10. Again, I hope this is helpful. Feel free to make any little adjustments to this. Plug and play, have some fun, right? The template works well though. Again, some kind of bilateral or two-legged squat or deadlift, right? Hinge. Some kind of upper body push or overhead press. Some kind of upper body pull, horizontal or vertical, which again, at some point we can get to more vertical pulling. And then some kind of unilateral or single leg work. Another thing that I like to do is I like to add a little bit of core stuff in. So if you're doing this little circuit of 4 exercises and you want a little break or recovery, what you can always do is maybe add that back pressure crunch back in, right? Well, let's move on. So I'm gonna close with this video and then I'll send you another video with B, with the second variation of this template. All right, aloha.